In today's episode, we're looking at the dumbest animal attacks, from a selfie with grizzly bear cubs in Yellowstone to mimicking a silverback gorilla in Uganda. But first, we start in Costa Rica, where teasing a crocodile for social media turned deadly. It was June 14, 2019, along the muddy banks of the Tarcoles River in Punta Arenas province, Costa Rica. The river, notorious for its dense population of American crocodiles, winds through mangrove forests before emptying into the Pacific. Locals and tourists alike flock to the bridge above to watch the massive reptiles bask on sandbars below. Illegal feeding over the years had conditioned many of the crocodiles to associate humans with food, making them bolder and more willing to approach the shoreline. The low water season had exposed more of the muddy banks, creating deceptive footing that appeared solid but was slick with algae and decomposing vegetation. Warning signs posted along the bridge and riverbank had faded from sun exposure, their messages barely legible. Sofia Rojas, a 25-year-old marketing assistant from San Jose, had driven down with her friend Carla Jimenez for a weekend getaway. Both women were drawn to the thrill of close wildlife encounters, often posting videos to social media. That afternoon, they hired Diego Vargas, a 47-year-old boatman known for his cautious nature and strict adherence to safety protocols. Diego had been ferrying tourists along the river for over a decade and had seen firsthand how dangerous the crocodiles could become when provoked. He warned the women repeatedly not to approach the water's edge or attempt to feed the animals. A park warden patrolling the bridge above also shouted down warnings, his stern voice carrying over the humid air. The repeated cautions hinted at the very real danger lurking just beneath the surface. Two other tourists sat quietly in the skiff, visibly uncomfortable with what was unfolding. Diego had even mentioned a recent incident where a crocodile had lunged at a fisherman who got too close. Sofia, however, was determined to capture something dramatic. She carried a plastic bag filled with fish scraps, intending to lure a crocodile close enough for a striking video. Carla encouraged her, phone in hand, ready to record. Diego idled the skiff a few meters offshore, shaking his head but saying nothing more. The midday heat pressed down as several crocodiles floated lazily near the surface, their eyes and nostrils barely visible above the waterline. American crocodiles are among the largest reptilian predators in the Western Hemisphere, capable of reaching lengths over 13 feet and weighing upwards of 880 pounds. Unlike their more aggressive cousins, they are generally wary of humans, but food conditioning erases that natural caution. They are ambush hunters, relying on explosive bursts of speed from a stationary position. Their jaws exert crushing force, and once they secure a grip, they employ a signature maneuver, the death roll, a violent rotational spin designed to disorient prey and tear flesh. In the Tarcoles River, these animals have become accustomed to boats and human presence, making them unpredictable and dangerous. Sofia stepped onto the slick bank, her sandals sinking slightly into the algae-coated mud. She waved a fish scrap toward the water, laughing as a large crocodile began to angle toward her. The animal moved with eerie silence, only its eyes and the ridge of its snout breaking the surface. Sofia turned her back to the river for a moment, grinning at Carla and the camera. Her heel slipped on the wet surface. She windmilled her arms, struggling to regain balance. The crocodile exploded upward from the shallow shelf. Its jaws snapped shut around her lower left leg just above the ankle. The bite was immediate and total, teeth punching through skin, muscle, and compressing bone. Sofia was yanked off her feet and dragged backward into knee-deep water. She tried to brace her free leg against the riverbed, but the crocodile was already in motion. It twisted its entire body in a rapid, forceful roll. Her knee dislocated with an audible pop as ligaments tore. The rotational force pulled her completely under the surface, and a cloud of silt erupted around them. The crocodile released briefly, repositioning for a better hold. It clamped down again, this time higher on her thigh. The teeth sank deep, severing the femoral artery. Blood darkened the water in thick plumes. The animal dragged her toward a deeper channel, its powerful tail sweeping side to side. Sofia's head went under again. She could not surface. The crocodile maintained its grip, holding her submerged as she struggled. Her movements weakened. Water filled her lungs. The combination of catastrophic blood loss and drowning ended her life within minutes. The crocodile eventually released her body in the deeper current, where it drifted before snagging on submerged roots. Nearby crocodiles, drawn by the splashing and scent of blood, began to gather in the shallows, a common behavioral response in areas where multiple animals compete for food. Diego radioed for help immediately, but by the time authorities arrived, there was nothing to be done. Sophia's body was recovered later that afternoon. The park warden filed a report citing repeated safety violations and the dangers of feeding wildlife. Her family released a brief statement expressing their grief and urging others to respect wildlife boundaries. Local officials announced plans to increase patrols and remove habituated crocodiles from high-traffic areas. But Sofia Rojas was not the last to underestimate the power of wild predators. Thousands of miles north in Yellowstone National Park, Margaret Doyle would soon face a grizzly bear protecting her cubs. It was September 17, 2018, near a roadside meadow in Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming. The late summer sun cast long shadows across the golden grassland, where wild berries still clung to low bushes, drawing wildlife out into the open. Cars lined the pullout along the main road, their occupants spilling onto the shoulder with cameras and phones raised. About 230 feet into the meadow, a grizzly sow and her two cubs foraged peacefully, the cubs tumbling over each other while their mother stripped berries from branches with practiced efficiency. Park rangers moved along the crowd, reminding visitors of the mandatory 100-yard distance rule for bears, but the excitement made compliance difficult. Margaret Doyle, a 39-year-old accountant from Ohio, had been traveling through the park with her companion Daniel Price, a 41-year-old software engineer. The two had planned the trip for months, eager to experience Yellowstone's wildlife. Daniel was cautious by nature, constantly checking park guidelines and urging Margaret to stay behind the low rope barrier that rangers had hastily strung between wooden posts. Ranger Lewis, a 31-year-old with 5 years of experience, patrolled the growing crowd with visible frustration. He repeated the distance rule multiple times, his tone growing sharper as people edged closer. A retired teacher in her early 60s stood near Margaret, mentioning casually that she had seen a sign earlier that morning warning of recent bear activity in the area. The repeated warnings and the visible tension among park staff hinted at the volatility of the situation, but the allure of a close-up photograph proved too strong for many. Margaret stepped past the rope barrier, moving several meters into the meadow. She wanted a selfie with one of the cubs visible in the background. Daniel called after her, his voice tight with concern, but she waved him off. She lowered into a crouch to steady her phone, her back partially turned toward the sow. Grizzly bears are among the most formidable predators in North America, with adult females weighing between 290 and 400 pounds and males often exceeding 600 pounds. Despite their size, they are capable of reaching speeds up to about 35 miles per hour in short bursts. Sows with cubs are especially dangerous, driven by an intense protective instinct. Any perceived threat to their young can trigger a defensive charge, and unlike bluff charges meant to intimidate, a committed attack involves devastating physical force. Their claws, measuring up to 10 centimeters, and powerful jaws can inflict catastrophic injuries within seconds. The sow lifted her head, nostrils flaring. She huffed once, a sharp exhalation that carried across the meadow. Then she charged. Her massive body closed the distance with terrifying speed, paws pounding the earth in a rhythmic thunder. Margaret rose from her crouch and turned, stumbling backward over a small hummock of grass. She fell as the bear reached her. The sow struck first with her right forelimb, a sweeping blow that caught Margaret across the shoulder and chest, sending her sprawling onto her side. The bear was on her instantly, pressing down with her full weight. Her jaws clamped onto Margaret's left shoulder, teeth punching through the fabric of her jacket and into the muscle beneath. The bite crushed the clavicle with an audible crack. The sow shook her head once, a violent lateral motion that tore tissue and dislocated the shoulder joint. Margaret's right arm flailed. The bear repositioned, planting a forepaw on her midsection and driving the air from her lungs. The sow bit again, this time targeting the upper chest and neck area. Teeth penetrated deep, severing blood vessels and crushing the trachea. Blood poured from the wounds, soaking into the grass. The bear lifted her head briefly, scanning the crowd of onlookers who had begun to scatter and shout. She returned her attention to Margaret, delivering another crushing bite to the torso. Ribs fractured under the pressure. Internal organs were compressed and torn. The sow stepped back, huffing and swaying her head. She made a short, mock charge toward a man who had moved closer, then circled back to her cubs. Ranger Lewis discharged a canister of bear spray in the sow's direction, creating a protective protective barrier of aerosol that helped push the animal back toward the tree line, a standard emergency response in bear encounters. She herded them quickly toward the tree line, glancing back once before disappearing into the forest. Margaret lay motionless in the trampled grass, her injuries incompatible with life. Massive hemorrhaging from the neck and chest wounds, combined with traumatic damage to vital structures, had caused rapid cardiovascular collapse. Ranger Lewis radioed for emergency response, but paramedics arriving minutes later could only confirm what was already evident. The park launched an immediate investigation, closing the meadow and surrounding trails. Wildlife officials tracked the sow and her cubs, but determined that the bear had acted defensively and posed no ongoing threat to visitors who maintained proper distance. Margaret's family released a statement acknowledging the tragedy and expressing hope that others would heed safety warnings. The open meadows of Yellowstone are worlds apart from the dense, shadowed waterways of the Brazilian Pantanal. In May 2017, wildlife photographer Lorraine Foster joined a guided expedition deep into that flooded wilderness, where jaguars hunt along riverbanks choked with reeds, and the line between observer and prey can vanish in an instant. It was May 22, 2017, along a narrow game trail skirting the riverine gallery forest in the northern Pantanal of Mato Grosso, Brazil. The low water season had concentrated wildlife along the shrinking channels, turning the river edges into hunting grounds for the region's apex predators. Dappled sunlight filtered through the canopy, illuminating patches of mud marked with fresh tracks. Capybaras grazed nervously near reed beds, and a caiman surfaced briefly before submerging again. The air was thick with humidity and the calls of distant birds. The trail itself was barely wide enough for single-file walking, winding between towering trees, whose roots created natural barriers along the riverbank. Lorraine Foster, a 34-year-old wildlife photographer from Canada, had joined a small expedition led by Paulo, a 52-year-old guide with decades of experience navigating the Pantanal's dangers. Paulo was disciplined and observant, known for his ability to read animal behavior and keep his clients safe. That morning, he had noted fresh jaguar prints along the trail, large and deep, indicating a sizable male moving parallel to the river. The prints were less than an hour old, still sharp in the damp soil. He urged the group to stay together and avoid approaching the water's edge. Nina, a 29-year-old photographer traveling with Lorraine, kept to the protocol, maintaining her position within the group. A boat pilot in his late 40s waited at a bend downstream, growing impatient as the morning wore on. The time pressure nudged Lorraine to hurry, and when she spotted a capybara near the reeds, she made a decision that would prove fatal. Paulo had warned specifically about separating from the group in areas with fresh jaguar sign, noting that the cats often used the dense vegetation as ambush points. Lorraine stepped off the trail, moving closer to frame the shot. She knelt in the soft earth, her back to a wall of dense vegetation. The rest of the group continued ahead, their voices fading. Paulo called back, reminding her to rejoin them, but she waved him off, focused on her camera. The capybara she was photographing suddenly froze, its ears swiveling backward. Jaguars are the largest cats in the Americas, with males weighing between 200 and 265 pounds. Unlike other big cats that suffocate their prey, jaguars possess the strongest bite force relative to body size of any feline, capable of crushing skulls and piercing turtle shells. They are solitary ambush predators, relying on stealth and explosive power to close short distances. Their preferred method of killing involves a precise bite to the back of the neck or the base of the skull, severing the spinal cord or penetrating the brain. In the Pantanal, where prey is abundant during the dry season, jaguars patrol riverbanks and forest edges, often remaining motionless for hours before striking. The reeds behind Lorraine shifted. The jaguar burst from cover in two powerful bounds, closing the gap before she could react. Its jaws clamped onto the upper portion of her neck from behind, teeth sinking deep into the soft tissue. The bite was immediate and precise, targeting the cervical vertebrae. The force of the attack drove her forward onto her hands and knees, her camera tumbling into the mud. The jaguar maintained its grip, applying sustained pressure. Its canines penetrated between the vertebrae, compressing the spinal cord and cutting off nerve signals to the rest of her body. Lorraine's arms gave out, and she collapsed onto her side. The jaguar Jaguar adjusted its hold, repositioning slightly to ensure maximum control. Blood seeped from the puncture wounds, pooling beneath her. The cat began to drag her toward the water's edge, its powerful neck and shoulder muscles pulling her weight with ease. Her legs scraped over roots and stones, leaving a trail in the dirt. The jaguar paused at the shallows, releasing briefly to gain a better grip. It bit down again, this time higher on the neck, and pulled her partially into the water. The shallow current lapped around her torso. The jaguar held the bite for several minutes, its breathing steady and controlled. Lorraine's movements had ceased entirely. The combination of cervical trauma, spinal cord compression, and asphyxiation from the sustained neck hold had ended her life. The jaguar eventually released her and began dragging her toward thicker cover along the bank, instinctively moving its kill away from open areas. Paolo realized Lorraine had not rejoined the group and retraced his steps. He found the disturbed vegetation and the drag marks leading toward the water. He shouted for the others and radioed the boat pilot. Authorities were contacted, but recovery efforts were delayed due to the remote location and the presence of the jaguar nearby. Wildlife officials arrived the following day and located Lorraine's body partially concealed in dense undergrowth. The jaguar had abandoned the site. An investigation confirmed the attack was predatory in nature, likely triggered by her isolated position and proximity to the animal's hunting corridor. Her family issued a statement expressing their loss and emphasizing the importance of following guide instructions in wilderness areas. Local authorities implemented new protocols requiring photographers to remain within arm's reach of their guides in known jaguar territories. While Lorraine Foster met her end in the shadows of the Pantanal forest, another tragedy was unfolding in the open waters off South Australia. Chad Morrison would soon discover that the ocean's apex predator shows no mercy to those who ignore the rules of engagement. It was January 18th, 2016, near a small island group off South Australia's Eyre Peninsula. The waters around the islands are renowned for their population of great white sharks, drawing licensed operators who offer cage diving experiences under strict safety protocols. The sea was choppy that morning, with moderate visibility and long surface glare reflecting off the swells. A private vessel had anchored outside the designated operator zone, its owner eager to capture footage without the expense and restrictions of a licensed tour. The boat rocked gently as gulls circled overhead, drawn by the scent of chum being ladled into the water. Chad Morrison, a 29-year-old videographer from Melbourne, had been invited aboard by Ben, a 33-year-old boat owner known for his brash attitude and willingness to cut corners. Ben had pushed for closer footage, dismissing the need for permits or proper safety equipment. A cage sat unused on the deck, deemed too cumbersome for the kind of shots Ben wanted. Rhea, a 27-year-old deckhand with limited experience, had reminded them multiple times about the permit requirements and the dangers of entering the water without protection. Her cautious warnings went unheeded. A licensed operator on a nearby vessel had even radioed a warning, urging them to exit the water immediately and cease chumming. The ignored radio call foreshadowed the investigative approach that great whites are known for when stimulated by scent and movement. Chad, however, was determined to get his footage. He entered the water on a trailing line, his fins dangling near the surface as the chum slick drifted away from the transom. Great white sharks are the ocean's most formidable apex predators, reaching lengths of up to 20 feet and weighing over 2 tons. They possess rows of serrated teeth designed to tear through flesh and bone, and their bite force can exceed 1.8 tons per square inch. Great whites rely on a combination of electroreception, acute smell, and vision to locate prey. When investigating potential food sources, they often perform exploratory bites to assess whether the target is worth consuming. Their hunting strategy involves approaching from below and behind, using the contrast between the dark depths and the bright surface to remain undetected until the final moment. In areas with active chumming, their behavior becomes bolder and more investigative. The chum's slick spread across the surface, a dark, oily trail that attracted several sharks to the area. Chad floated near the line, adjusting his position as his legs scissored rhythmically to maintain stability. Below him, a large shape passed through the shimmer of refracted light, its silhouette unmistakable. The shark circled wider, then turned back toward the transom. It approached from below and behind, accelerating in a smooth upward glide. The shark bumped Chad's fin lightly with its snout, a tactile investigation. It veered veered away, circling at a distance of roughly 33 feet. Chad repositioned on the line, unaware of how close the animal had come. His legs continued their scissor motion, the movement creating vibrations that traveled through the water. The shark accelerated again, this time committing to a full strike. Its jaws opened wide as it surged upward, clamping down across Chad's right thigh and hip. The teeth sank deep, puncturing the femoral artery and crushing muscle tissue. The force of the bite carried him several meters through the water before the shark released. Blood erupted into the surrounding water in thick clouds, spreading rapidly. Chad's body went limp, his arms floating outward. The shark circled back, its movements deliberate and unhurried. It approached again from below, this time targeting the lower torso and upper left leg. The shark veered away, disappearing momentarily into deeper water. Moments later, it passed again beneath Chad, drawn by the blood and the vibrations of his flailing fins, a typical investigative pattern rather than a deliberate second strike. The second bite was equally devastating, teeth tearing through the pelvic region and severing additional major blood vessels. The shark shook its head briefly, a lateral motion that widened the wounds and caused further tissue damage. The animal released again and veered off into deeper water, disappearing from view. Chad floated near the surface, the line still attached to his harness. Ben and Rhea shouted from the deck, scrambling to haul him toward the platform. The water around him was dark with blood. By the time they pulled him onto the swim platform, he had lost consciousness. The injuries were catastrophic. The femoral artery had been completely severed, and the pelvic trauma had caused massive internal hemorrhaging. Despite attempts to apply pressure and control the bleeding, the blood loss was too rapid and too extensive. Chad Morrison died within minutes, his body unable to sustain the damage inflicted by the shark's powerful jaws. Authorities launched an immediate investigation into the incident. The private vessel was found to be operating without the required permits, and the use of chum outside designated zones was cited as a contributing factor. Ben faced potential charges for negligence and violation of marine safety regulations. Chad's family released a brief statement expressing their grief and calling for stricter enforcement of shark diving regulations. The incident reignited debates over unregulated shark tourism and the risks posed by individuals who prioritize spectacle over safety. Marine biologists noted that the shark's behavior was consistent with investigative bites triggered by chum and surface activity, emphasizing that great whites do not typically target humans as prey, but will investigate unfamiliar stimuli in their environment. The open ocean claimed Chad Morrison, but danger lurks not only in the water. Deep in the forests bordering Bwindi Impenetrable National Park in Uganda, Rose Carter would soon learn that mimicking the behavior of a silverback gorilla carries consequences far deadlier than she imagined. It was August 9th, 2016, along the forest edge near Bwindi Impenetrable National Park in southwestern Uganda. The area where dense montane forest meets community farmland has long been a zone of tension, with habituated guerrilla troops occasionally venturing out to forage on crops. Soft morning light filtered through the tall trees, illuminating the understory where a troop of mountain gorillas fed quietly on vegetation. The air was cool and still, carrying the earthy scent of damp soil and decaying leaves. Rose Carter, a 45-year-old charity volunteer from England, had arrived in Uganda 2 weeks earlier to work with a rural development organization. She had expressed interest in seeing the gorillas and was connected with Kato, a 36-year-old unlicensed guide who offered off-trail viewings at a fraction of the cost of official permits. Kato was opportunistic and evasive, dismissing concerns about safety and protocol in favor of profit. He led Rose and a small group, including Miriam, a 43-year-old charity volunteer who was conscientious and rule-minded, along an unmarked path that skirted the park boundary. Miriam repeatedly urged the group to maintain distance and follow established guidelines, but Kato waved off her concerns. A local farmer in his 50s, working a nearby field, noticed the group and warned them about recent unpredictable behavior from the troop, particularly the dominant silverback. His warning foreshadowed the defensive response that territorial males are known to exhibit when challenged. The troop fed peacefully in the understory, the silverback positioned about 10 feet behind a sapling, his massive frame partially obscured by foliage. Kato instructed the group to stay back, but did not enforce the distance. Rose, captivated by the proximity of the animals, stepped ahead of the others. She raised her arms and thumped her chest twice in imitation of the display behavior she had seen in documentaries. The sound echoed through the quiet forest. Mountain gorillas are the largest living primates, with adult males, known as silverbacks, weighing between 300 to 485 pounds. Despite their herbivorous diet, they possess immense physical strength, with arm and jaw power capable of inflicting severe trauma. Silverbacks are responsible for protecting their troop, and they interpret certain behaviors, such as direct eye contact, loud vocalizations, or chest beating, as challenges to their authority. When threatened, a silverback may perform a bluff charge, but if the perceived threat persists, the charge can transition into a full physical assault. Their canines can deliver crushing bites, and their powerful limbs can generate blunt force trauma sufficient to break bones and rupture internal organs. The silverback rose to his full height, his eyes locked on Rose. He dropped to all fours and charged in a direct line, covering the distance in seconds. Rose stumbled backward, her foot catching on a root. She fell as the silverback reached her. He struck first with both hands, a powerful two-handed shove that sent her sprawling onto uneven ground. Her head struck a protruding stone, and her vision blurred. The silverback stood over her, his breath audible, and delivered a forceful bite to her left shoulder. His canines punctured through the fabric of her shirt and into the muscle beneath, crushing the clavicle and tearing tissue. Blood soaked into her clothing. He pressed down with his full body weight, pinning her to the ground. Rose's right arm flailed weakly, but the silverback ignored it. He shifted position and struck her chest with his forearm, a downward blow that fractured multiple ribs. The force of the impact compressed her lungs and caused immediate internal bleeding. She gasped, unable to draw a full breath. The silverback grabbed her by the torso and lifted her slightly before tossing her a short distance. She landed on her side, her body limp. He stood upright again, beating his chest in a display directed at the other humans, who had scattered and were shouting from a safer distance. He returned to Rose and delivered another blow to her midsection, his fist driving into her abdomen with enough force to rupture her spleen and liver. He returned to Rose and delivered one final shove, knocking her onto her side. The impact caused severe internal trauma, including ruptured organs. Then, as suddenly as it began, the attack ended. The silverback retreating once the perceived threat was no longer moving. Satisfied that the threat had been neutralized, the silverback turned and moved back toward his troop. He vocalized once, a low rumble, and began herding the other gorillas deeper into the forest. Rose lay motionless on the forest floor, her injuries catastrophic. The combination of blunt force trauma to the chest and abdomen, along with massive internal hemorrhaging, had caused her cardiovascular system to collapse. She died within minutes. Cato and Miriam approached cautiously once the troop had moved away. Cato radioed for help, but the remote location meant that assistance would take hours to arrive. By the time park rangers and medical personnel reached the site, Rose had been dead for over an hour. An investigation was launched into the circumstances of the encounter. Cato was found to be operating without proper authorization, and his dismissal of safety protocols was cited as a primary factor in the tragedy. Rose's family released a statement expressing their sorrow and calling for greater regulation of gorilla tourism. Conservation organizations emphasized that mountain gorillas are wild animals and that approaching them outside of sanctioned visits poses significant risks. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.